Hi, my friends. How are you? I hope you're doing well and you're buckling up and really buckling up because it's the end of the term, right? And you want to make sure that uh, you pass your courses and you want to make sure that you pass them with uh, stellar grades. I wish you all success. So, my friends. We are going to continue our lectures. We talked about the Sasanians, and I want to bring the story of the Romans to the period where they come to confront the Sasanians, right? That means the early 6th century. So, in order to bring the story of Romans to the 6th century, I'm sorry, early 7th century, right? I want to, because it has been a while that we talked about the Romans, I want to just refresh your memory. So, I'm going to go quite fast over our storyline, yeah. So you remember that we said that Rome, right, was a republic of farmers. You remember the legend of Romulus and how he was founded. How the him and his brother were fed by ships, right? And then we get the chronology, right? Of first there comes the monarchy where you have the seven kings, right? Romulus is the first king, right? And then we get to the last king, and that's a period of monarchy, right? It goes from mid 8th century to late 6th century, right? BCE, my friends, right? So at the end of the monarchy, as you remember, we got the republic, right? We got the republic. So here are seven kings, right? And the first one of which is Romulus, remember, and the last one of which is Brutus. Brutus is called the liberator, right? Because he comes and destroys the last king, right, and establishes, right, a res publica, meaning a republic, right? So Rome grows, as you remember, and then gradually Rome comes and conquers all of Italy, right? And the first people that the Romans come to contact with, if as you remember, is the Carthaginians, right? Carthaginians who from their base in Carthage, somewhere here, right, have expanded through North Africa and have gone into Spain, right? This is Spain, right? And are the and are the continuation of the Phoenicians who controlled the trade and commerce in the Mediterranean lands, right? And you remember that the Romans, right, began to expand at the hands of the uh, I mean. Destroying the Carthaginians and taking over gradually, right, their lands, right, during what we call the Punic Wars, right, mid third century to mid second century BCE, right. A number of wars with Carthaginians, which are called the Punic Wars, right? So okay, so the republic is established, the Roman Republic, and it goes from 507 to 31 BC for 500 years, my friends. And I'm sorry, let me just get something that okay. Um, and lasted a great great time span, and we talked about the culture and political system of the Romans and the Romanizations, right? that, originally the Senate and whatnot were from landowners, right? And then the plebeians were the rest of the population. And then when the Romans went and conquered places to establish, right? So this is Roman Republic in the beginning of the at the end of the third century BCE, right? And then we see that it gets additions, right? Um, by the first century, right? By the beginnings of the first century BCE, right? So this is the Roman Republic in general. This is the period of the Roman Republic, right? And here is your Roman Empire in 117 AD or CE, right? But we know that, as Rome extended itself, right? Um, it had created a vast sort of empire that eventually sort of destroyed the republican system of government, right? In at in the in the second and third century, third and second century BCE, when Rome was expanding, right? As you remember, the farmers, which were the backbone of the Roman army, right, were away for extensive periods of land, right? And when they come back, right, in their absence, wealthy Romans would buy their lands, right, and create what is latifundia, right? And meanwhile, the peasants come back and they come into slums and growing urban slums with a lot of urban masses that have no work to do, right? Meanwhile, latifundias are concentrating all the wealth in their hand, right? And they're creating sort of broad estates, right? And this is all happening, right? This is all happening in the third meaning. Oh, sorry. In the third meaning, 200 BCE, in 200s BCE and 100s BCE, right? So it is this 2 centuries, right? Basically from 300s BCE to 100 BCE, right? That this process, right, the expansion of the Roman Empire and during the actually during the Republic, right, and the failure of the Republic, right, because of the uh, crises that sort of were established as a result of the concentration of economy in part in the hand of the few, right? And so on and so forth. And you go to my friend, you go to your Roman Empire when you're reviewing it, and you remember all the context of it. Yeah, my friends. So then we get to the empire, right? To the chronology of the empire, right? We get from 27 BCE to 380 to 380. This is wrong, my friends. It's CE. 380 CE, right? 380 AD, Anno Domino, right? And well, of course, you know what happens is that during this period, Octavian or Augustus becomes the first emperor, right? And then you get the introduction of new men, right? From basically 100 BCE to 86 BCE, right? At the end of the Republic, right? When there is all these problems that are that are confronting the empire. And remember, what happens is that because these peasants that go into the cities, they don't have any work to do, right? Then there appears these great men, right, who attract the populations to themselves, the poor and poverty stricken sort of populations of the urban center. They attract them to themselves, and they promise them pieces of land if they become loyal to them. And as a result, right, in this era of a new era is created, right? The era of new men, and it starts with Gaius Marius, right? And we get people like men like Sulla, Pompey, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, and finally Octavian or Augustus, right? Between a period that runs from 88 BCE to 31 BCE, right? So, so remember, there's the chronology of the empire, right? 27 to 380 CE. So this is just before the empire, at the end of the republic, right? That this is happening, right? These new men are coming to the fore, right? And eventually they establish, right, the first triumvirate, right? That the first triumvirate between Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, right? Caesar very ambitious, Crassus very wealthy, and Pompey great reputation, right? So and then eventually, right, Caesar wins from amongst this triumvirate, right? Caesar starts by expanding his realm greatly. One of the major things that he does, right, is that he goes into the regions, right, where the Celtic people are prior to this have come and settled in Celtia, right? Remember, this is the continuation. The Celts are the continuation of this Indo-European migration, right? That comes and ultimately comes to around Spain and settles in the regions of greater region of Spain, right? So that you have your Celtae, right, and you had your Germany. Because of the Germanic invasions, we will get to it, right, and so on and so forth. So Caesar comes, right, and one of the things that he does is he extends and takes over, right, the Celtic lands, right, of the people, the Celtic people of Gaul, right, of France, right, and yeah, of France, and yeah, and extends the empire, right? Extends the empire. He's victorious in the civil wars here. He's victorious. He conquers Gaul, first of all, in 58 to 50 BCE. Excuse me, he is a victor in the civil wars that takes place amongst the three the three members of the triumvirate, right? And then at the end, from 46 to 44, he rules as a dictator, right? So at the death of Julius Caesar, my friends, you remember we get to 44 BCE, and already Caesar has come into, the Romans have come into, well, they have taken parts of Asia Minor, right? They have taken all of Eastern Mediterranean, and not all of Syria, but parts of Syria, right? They have taken parts of Syria, and as we will see, it is then, I mean, as we have seen, it is then that they come into contact. At this time, who was there? There were still Parthians, and they come into contact with Parthians, and that's how the Roman-Parthian War started. Remember, Roman-Parthian War, where yeah, they constantly were on each other's sort of throats with their wars, right? So this is the extent of the Roman Empire at the end of Julius Caesar's reign, right? In 44 BCE, at the death of Caesar, who was assassinated, right? You get the second triumvirate, right? From 43 BCE to 32 BCE, right? Where you get Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian, right? And we will get and the this realm that Caesar has created, right? It's kind of divided between the three of them, and you see Octavian gets the largest share of it. Octavian here, right? And yes, Octavian gets the, excuse me, my friends, okay, gets the largest share of it, right? And Pompey gets not that much of it, right? And Mark Antony, I guess, gets a part of it, right? And Marcus Rapidus gets a part of it, right? And so on and so forth, right? The empire is divided in the second triumvirate between the three members of the triumvirate, right? Now, Octavian, right? Who was actually a military dictator and never called himself, an emperor, but he called himself the first among equals, like Principe, right? And sort of the beginnings of the empire, right, is also called the Principate period, right? So Augustus, Augustus came and sort of won the whole empire, and he became the first emperor, right? And he became a major sort of Roman emperor that undertook a lot of reforms, right? And remember, he sort of allied himself with the class of merchants or equites, right, that were rising, right, in the were rising at the beginning of this first century CE, my friends, right? I don't know whether okay. At the beginning of 14, the fourth, yeah, first century CE, yeah, my friends. So he associated himself with the merchant class, and from the sort of the beginning of Augustus's reign, for the next 200 years, right, we have this sort of Pax Romana, right? Pax Romana, where there is wealth and trade and commerce is taking place, right? In the in the Roman Empire. At the same time that this Pax Romana is taking place, right? And remember, the Romans have already come into Eastern Mediterranean, right? And they come into contact actually with Judea, right? And in Judea, right, there are many events that are happening, including the birth of Christ, the rise of Christianity, and of course, you have Jewish populations originally here, right? And the Romans, when they come to Judea, they come into contact with the Romans, right? And it is the Romans, right, that begin to persecute, right, the population, the gradually rising, the Christian community, and it is under their governor, yeah, Pontius Pilatus, that Jesus Christ is ultimately murdered, right? Put on the cross, right? So after this, and at the same time, right? At the same time that the okay, my friends, let me see. I have to. Okay, I cannot be pinpointing anymore, I think. So okay, at the same time that the empire is going through this Romana, right? There is the growth of Christianity, and you see that extent of Christianity at 300 CE, right? The Christian communities can be found in Eastern Mediterranean, right? In Anatolia, right? In parts of Greece, in Italy, in Spain, in North Africa, right? Egypt, and so on and so forth, right? And by the 600s, you see all of this territory becomes more or less Christian, right? Northern Europe, right? They're still worshiping trees in Northern Europe, right? So the Christianization is a slow movement, right? So this is the Pax Romana and the commerce that I was talking about, right? And there's the Roman peace, stability, right? And basically, during this period, as we talked about it before, Romans become middlemen, right? And taking the wealth of various provinces under their control, right? Absorbing it into Rome, or among in the Roman cities that they're building, right? That this yeah, and remember that this latifundi are also like coming into being, right? And it so this Pax Romana, right, and this growth of the economy and whatnot, a good portion of this, as you remember, is coming from the east. Yeah, I mean, now they integrated the Romans integrated the economy of the Mediterranean, right? That's as far as that goes, but there's still all this wealth, right, coming to them as from the east and of course from North Africa, right? So in a sense, you know, when talking about North Africa, they're connecting it to Central Africa, as we said, right? And when you come to Eastern Mediterranean, you come to Western Asia and its wealth, right? And of course, you know, the wealth of the territories that you conquer, right? So the city of Rome itself, right? Came to be dependent on grain that was coming right from Sicily and Egypt in particular, right? So and the gradually, right, gradually the empire extends itself, right? Extends itself to areas that it is, you know, extensive areas that is hard to control, right? And there is a crack in this edifice of Pax Romana, and the third century crisis takes place, right? Political, military, and economic problems beset, excuse me, beset the Roman Empire. As you remember, then comes the Diocletian, the savior, right? At the time that it was bleakest, right? And what does he do? Well, he does the following. He divides amongst his reforms is that he divides the Roman Empire into two parts, right? Western Roman Empire and Eastern Roman Empire, and this division takes place in the 4th century CE, right? 4th century CE, Diocletian, right, comes and affects the reforms in this way. It divides the Roman Empire, right, to the eastern and western parts of it. Now, as he does that, I mean, even before he begins to do that, right, from around 100 basically CE, you have infiltrations of Germanic invasions where that basically attack Western Roman Empire, right, and they come to conquer, right, a great many of the regions under the Roman Empire on for their own, right? So, for instance, the Angles, right, who are Germanic, come and take the Isles, right? The Huns, as you see, who are also Germanic, right, attack, right, in such way. The Visigoths, right, Visigoths, you see, they go their way, right? And the Visigoths. The Vandals come into Carthage, right? All these Germanic invasions come to take place. The Huns, the Vandals, the Goths, right? Ostrogoths, Visigoths, the Vandals, right? They basically come and take over the Western Roman Empire, right? And it is the combination of this Germanic invasions and the rise of latifundi, right? That eventually creates for you the medieval kingdoms, right, of these regions, right, which unfortunately we cannot go into it. So as a result of these Germanic invasions, right, Germanic kingdoms are established, and in medieval Christian kingdoms, right? So as a result of all these invasions in the 5th century, right, CE, the Western Roman Empire collapses, right? The Western Roman Empire collapses, and then comes Constantine the Great, right, in the Eastern Roman Empire, and eventually wins, right, the war over the Eastern Roman Empire, and he establishes his dynasty as the ruling dynasty, the Constantine dynasty, right, and reunites, right, under his rule, the empire by 324, right, and meanwhile, right, Christianity is spreading in the empire, and in the early 4th century CE, right, when Christianity is sort of expanding, right, in the 4th century, by the early 4th century, right. In other words, the Christian communities that were, of course, under sort of oppression up to now, because they had left this Roman pantheon of gods and whatnot, and they came to believe in one God only, right? Already this process was taking place, and Constantine the Great comes and says that, okay, I had a dream where I had seen a cross, which is a sign of the Christian God, right, superimposed on the sun, right, and he establishes the Edict of Milan, right, according to which Christian communities are no longer to be harassed and sort of persecuted in the gradually Christianizing empire, right, of of um, of the what they comes to be called the Eastern Christian Empire comes to be called Byzantium, right? And it is basically established by Constantine the Great, right? Where he comes and also establishes Istanbul, right? Constantinople, right, as the seat of his empire, right, and so on and so forth, right. So we fast forward, my friends, you know, to the 6th century now, right? These dynasties came one after the other and ruled over the Eastern Roman Empire, which in later scholarship, in the modern period, came to be called the Byzantine Empire because of its complicated sort of social social structure, so to speak, right? So so the Christian Church is basically officiated during the Constantine the Great's reign, right? I'm sorry, this was a little bit we're not yet going fast forward, right? This is Constantine establishing the Constantinian church, right? you have the Germanic invasions, after which you have Germanic kingdoms created. Yes, my friends, you see, uh, in Europe, right? Out of which, Germania, and whatnot, you get your medieval kingdoms, right? And then we fast forward to the time of Justinian the Great, right? In the middle of the 6th century, right? And Justinian comes, and the empire that had been divided, right, in the 5th century, the empire that had been divided, he re-establishes the empire, right? And brings all of these people under his control. The Frankish kingdoms, right? I mean, he brings all of the Mediterranean lands under his control, but these kingdoms have been established already. Germanic kingdoms, right, have been established already. So Justinian, when he comes and comes into Anatolia, right, and comes into Egypt and whatnot, the moment that the Romans come to the east, right? Like in the 1st century BCE, 60 BCE, basically, right? They come to Eastern Mediterranean, and as I mentioned to you, the Romans take over, right, the Seleucid empires, if you remember, right, and come into contact with whom? With Parthians, who are also at the height of their empire, right? And Euphrates is established as basically the border between the Eastern Roman Empire, right, and the Iranians, right? So now the Iranians, when you had come already at the time of Constantine, right, already before Constantine, remember the Sasanians had in the early 3rd century BCE, the Sasanians had taken over from the Parthians. So when they took over from the Parthians, the Sasanians, they also took over the enemy, the confrontation with the so-called enemy of the Parthians, the Roman Empire. In this case, the Eastern Roman Empire, right? So when Constantine the Great is there, right, this is a time when the two Shapurs come, if you remember, right? And they are expanding their reforms, right? And if you remember, the Shapur II, right, goes and sort of Shapur II takes over all the coastal regions of the Arabian Peninsula and brings the Arab populations of those areas already under its control. So this what it means is that both the Romans, right, who had taken all of Eastern Mediterranean and Egypt, right, as well as Sasanians, right, they already in the 3rd century, they were already in contact with the Arabs, right? As you know, Shapur II had already established Arabs in parts of Iran in the Kerman area, right? So therefore, then by the time you get to the Justinians, you get, the Roman Empire is such, right, and it continues, and the Sasanian Empire is such, and it continues, right, and the Romans and the Sasanians, they have been at it by the 6th century for 3 centuries already, right? So this is the situation, right? Um, at the sort of at the height of the um, Roman Empire, right, under Justinian, and here are the Sasanians, right? You see the borders, right? The border basically is the Euphrates, right? And you see that the Arabs, right, are within the both two empires, right? And in contact with both empires, right? So then in the Eastern Roman Empire, gradually what we come to know as the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire ultimately goes to the 15th century, and that is a major story that we obviously cannot. It's beyond discourse, right? But so Eastern Roman Empire, you have the Eastern Roman Empire now and the Sasanians in the 6th century together, right? Um, and such is the cultural influence of the Eastern Roman Empire, right? West versus, right, what used to be the Western Roman Empire, right? The Western Roman Empire kept its Latin sort of influence. The Eastern Roman Empire maintained its Greek influence. Right now, the Western Roman Empire, you know, went with the Germanic kingdoms, right? A combination of Germanic kingdoms and Romans and Romanesque populations, right, in the Latin portions of the empire, which ultimately, as you remember, I mean, as I told you before, it gives rise to the medieval kingdoms, right? Uh, so and whereas during Justinian, right, you get this situation. You have so you have the Eastern Roman Empire, you have the Iranian empires. They have two Arab client states, right, under their control. They keep these client Arab states, the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids, the Ghassanids for the Romans and the Lakhmids for the Iranians, right? Remember, this is on all Iranian control, right? Remember that in 570, right, Khosrow the first occupied Yemen, remember, and it had all these coastal regions, right? And the Lakhmids took care of Bedouin Arabs in the middle, right? And the Ghassanis the same for the Byzantines, right? The Bedouin Arabs, right? So this was the Roman Empire at 600 CE, right? But Khosrow, meanwhile, had conquered Yemen, and this was the extent of the Persian Empire, and this was the extent of the Roman Empire at the time, right? Okay, then began, right, in 603, from 603 to 628 began the greatest, what has been called the greatest war of antiquity, right? Because obviously, yeah, and the Sasanians came and attacked the Byzantine Empire's realms, right? The Sasanians came and they took over all of Anatolia, they took over all of Syria, they took over all of Egypt, they had Yemen, right? They had all the coastal areas, right? And they had their empire itself, right? So what is happening is actually the Parthian sort of armies, right, are attacking the Byzantine Empire, right? Um, and during Khosrow II's time, right? And then therefore you get, this is the extent of the Iranian, the Sasanian Empire by 620s, right? By 620s, i.e., it has basically taken over all the West Asian parts of the Roman Empire from them, and they are threatening Constantinople itself. They have taken Egypt and so on and so forth. And they have done what everybody wanted to do all along, right? All the populations that lived here, right? All along, what did they want to do? They wanted to connect and have control over these seas, right? These seas which are over not only the land routes, right, trade routes, but the seas that are used for the trade, right? Obviously, I mean, naval trade is still one of the most important parts of our economy, right? I mean, a lot of goods that we bring from the east to ourselves, right? It is not stuff that we can sort of put on airplanes to be carried to us, right? Because they're bulks, right? Bulks of oil, for instance, barrels of oil, for instance, and all of this comes from the sea, right, my friend? Yeah. So during this time, of course, the oil of Western Asia was silk, right? And a lot of these wars that we are talking about between the Sasanians and the Eastern Romans or Byzantines, right, are over the trade routes, right, basically the trade routes, right, that crisscross, right, the Arabian Peninsula and Anatolia and Egypt together, right? So this is the Sasanian world at its greatest extent. Okay, so I will finish here, my friends, and the Eastern Roman parts, right? And we will begin our Arab and Islamic entrance into this cultural zone that I have for you depicted. Okay, my friends, I'm sorry that I was a little bit like just disjointed, but I hope you got the gist of the lecture. So talk to you soon with the Arabs and its rise of Arabs and Islam, my friends.